There was a boy named Zayan who always had something to prove. In every classroom discussion, he had an opinion. In every group project, he wanted his voice heard. He wasn't arrogant, just eager. He thought speaking up meant being strong, being smart, being seen. At first, people listened. Teachers praised his confidence. Classmates asked for his input. But slowly, something shifted. The more he talked, the less people seemed to hear him. Ideas that once felt sharp began to fall flat. His words filled the room, but they didn't stick. Zayan didn't notice it right away. He kept talking, kept explaining, kept justifying. But deep inside, a quiet frustration started to grow. Why was no one listening anymore? One day, during a debate, he spoke longer than anyone else. When he finished, the room was quiet. Not impressed, just tired. A classmate leaned over and whispered, "Sometimes less is more." Zayan laughed it off, but those words stayed with him longer than he expected. Later that evening, Zayan sat in his room, still hearing that whisper in his head. Sometimes less is more. He replayed moments from the past weeks, the times he explained things that didn't need explaining, the times he interrupted, the times he defended his point when no one asked him to. And then he noticed something. In all those moments, what changed? Nothing. No one was more convinced. No one was more inspired. All that noise and no real impact. He picked up a notebook and wrote one line. What if silence speaks louder? The next day at school, he tried something different. He said less. He listened more. At first, it felt strange. His mouth wanted to move, but he held back. And something unexpected happened. People leaned in when he did speak. His words carried more weight. He started to realize that power wasn't in the amount of words. It was in the intention behind them. Silence wasn't weakness. It was control. And control was something Zayan never realized he lacked until now. Over the next few days, Zayan continued his quiet experiment. In group discussions, he let others speak first. In class, he raised his hand only when he had something meaningful to add. At home, he paused before responding to his parents or siblings, not out of fear, out of awareness. It wasn't easy. Sometimes he felt invisible. But other times, something remarkable happened. People listened. When he did speak, his words felt sharper, more focused, and oddly, more respected. One morning, his teacher stopped him after class. "You've changed," she said. "You say less now, but when you do, people pay attention." That hit different. It wasn't just about speaking less, it was about learning when not to speak, about knowing that silence is not an absence of thought, but the space where thought becomes stronger. And that's when it clicked. Zayan hadn't lost his voice. He had finally started using it with purpose. If this story resonates with you, subscribe and turn on the bell. Sometimes the quietest changes make the loudest difference. A week later, Zayan was paired with Arya, one of the quietest students in class, for a two-person presentation. At first, he thought he'd have to lead it all. He was used to that. But he stopped himself. He listened, and he noticed something. Arya didn't say much, but when she did, it was clear, precise, thought out. Zayan started taking notes, not just on the topic, but on how she delivered it. No over-explaining, no noise, just calm confidence. During their final presentation, Zayan let Arya take the lead. He added only what was necessary. Their classmates were silent the entire time, hanging on every word. When they finished, the teacher said, "That was one of the most grounded, focused presentations I've seen." Zayan didn't smile to show off. He just nodded. Inside, he felt something shift again. His value wasn't in dominating the room, it was in respecting it. And for the first time, he realized real influence often comes with less volume and more intention. Later that evening, Zayan walked home with his hands in his pockets, the afternoon sun painting long shadows across the pavement. He wasn't thinking about praise. He was thinking about presence, about how different it felt to hold back. Not because he had nothing to say, but but because he had started choosing when to say it. He remembered the old version of himself, always filling silence, always reaching for words to prove something. But now, silence felt like a space he could own. A space where he could think clearly, feel grounded, and act with meaning. That night, he wrote something in his journal he never thought he would. Silence isn't the opposite of strength. It's the practice of it. He looked at that line for a long time. It didn't sound like the old Zayan, but it felt true. It felt earned. The next day, when a heated argument broke out in class, Zayan didn't jump in. He observed. And when the teacher asked for his thoughts, he spoke calmly, directly, without emotion. People listened. From that day forward, Zayan no longer felt the need to be the loudest. He found himself watching more, reading between the lines, picking up on things he used to miss. A nod from someone who rarely spoke, a hesitation in a friend's voice, a glance that carried more than words ever could. And people noticed the shift, not because he announced it, but because his presence changed. He didn't take up space, he held it. He didn't push his ideas. He placed them carefully, like stones in water, causing ripples without splashing. One afternoon, his teacher asked him to mentor a younger student who struggled with confidence. Zayan agreed, but instead of giving advice, he listened. Instead of correcting, he encouraged. The student started opening up, not because Zayan spoke perfectly, but because he knew when to stay silent. That day, Zayan wrote again in his journal, "I used to want people to hear me. Now I want my actions to speak for themselves." It was no longer about what he said. It was about what he did. A few weeks later, during a school-wide event, Zayan was asked to join a student panel on leadership. He almost declined. The old version of him would have jumped at the spotlight, but now he hesitated. Then he realized, maybe this was a moment not to speak more, but to speak right. When his turn came, the room was buzzing. Students leaned in, waiting for something powerful, something impressive. Zayan took a breath, looked around, and said quietly, "Leadership isn't about talking the most. It's about knowing when not to speak and doing what matters, even when no one's watching." The room went silent, not the awkward kind, the meaningful kind. And in that moment, Zayan understood something he'd never forget. When you stop trying to impress, you start to influence, not with volume, but with value. He left the stage without fanfare, but people remembered what he said, not because he said it loudly, but because he meant every word. That night, Zayan walked home under a sky full of stars. The air was cool. The streets were quiet. He didn't play music in his ears like he used to. He didn't rehearse imaginary arguments or replay old conversations. He just walked, in silence. And in that stillness, he felt full. He thought about how much had changed, not in others, but in him. He no longer needed to explain himself to feel worthy. He didn't chase attention to feel seen. He had learned to trust the quiet work, the silent progress, the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but stays. Back in his room, he wrote one final line in his journal, "Say less, mean more." He closed the book and smiled, not because he had finished something, but because he had found a way to begin again, better. Because in a world addicted to noise, real power isn't loud. It's quiet, it's steady, and it's yours, the moment you stop performing and start acting.